Canada's foreign minister just delivered a masterclass in diplomatic resistance, and it's exactly what Trump didn't want to hear. While the world watched at the United Nations General Assembly on Monday, Foreign Minister Anita Anand walked a razor-thin tightrope, pushing back against Donald Trump's aggressive America First agenda while trying not to completely torch Canada's most important economic relationship. But here's the thing. Her speech was a calculated rejection of everything Trump stands for, wrapped in diplomatic language that couldn't hide its true message. Trump famously declared at his inauguration that during every single day of the Trump administration, "I will very simply put America first." Since then, his actions have followed that playbook with devastating precision. He's called for making Canada the 51st state, threatened sweeping 25% tariffs on Canadian products, and repeatedly derided the United Nations itself.
And Canada called me a couple of weeks ago. They want to be part of it. To which I said, well, why don't you just join our country? You become 51, become the 51st state, and you get it for free. So I don't know if that made a big impact, but it does make.
Just last week, Trump stood before the General Assembly asking, what is the purpose of the United Nations, and claiming that not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. But Anand wasn't having any of it. In her speech, she delivered what can only be described as gentle but firm pushback, telling the Assembly that multilateralism remains our best hope to address global challenges rather than rejecting international norms. Then, switching to Canada's second official language, French, she drove the knife deeper. Today, the multilateral system is threatened, and some countries are turning toward protectionism and unilateralism. She didn't name Trump directly, but everyone in that room knew exactly who she was talking about. This wasn't just diplomacy, this was diplomatic warfare, conducted with surgical precision that few could match.
It came as a bolt from the blue last weekend when Carney put out a one-pager describing Canada's new attitude in the Hamas and Israeli war. It really did come as a bit of a surprise to the extent, even though we can say that recognition of a two-state solution, it has always been part of Canadian foreign policy. It came just as he was heading to the United Nations, and it was heavily slanted against Israel. That was, of course, the victim of a horrific terrorist attack almost exactly 2 years ago. Now everybody has been watching in horror at what's been happening in Gaza, and as Prime Minister Carney said, Canada felt that it had to do something. We'll see how that one plays out. But I think that on that stage, he was talking to an audience that included many people who simply agreed with him. He was very, very wise to avoid too much Trump. He didn't react too much to what Trump's bizarre, meandering 1 hour rant, and now asking for an investigation because he was sabotaged at the UN. I think he sabotaged himself, but that's beside the point. I think overall, Carney's performance was excellent. He's admired and respected on the world stage. Marcia, he's not just the Prime Minister of Canada.
To understand why this moment is so significant, you have to rewind to how we got here. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't just stumble into power, he rode a wave of anti-Trump sentiment all the way to victory. The Liberal Party was trailing badly in polls until Trump's annexation threats and trade war rhetoric sparked something unprecedented, a surge of Canadian nationalism that completely flipped the electoral map. Carney's election victory in April was fueled directly by Trump's aggressive posturing. More than 75% of Canada's exports go to the United States, making Trump's tariff threats an existential economic crisis. But instead of backing down, Canadians rallied around a leader who promised to stand up to American bullying. Carney's elbows-up campaign, a hockey term for defensive positioning, resonated with voters who were tired of being pushed around. The Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, who had been leading in polls with his Canada First slogan that clearly mimicked Trump's rhetoric, saw his fortunes collapse as voters rejected anything that resembled Trumpism. Poilievre didn't just lose the election, he lost his own parliamentary seat that he'd held for 20 years. That's how toxic association with Trump became in Canadian politics. But here's where Trump's strategy has completely backfired. His threats were supposed to intimidate Canada into submission, to force them into accepting whatever deal he wanted to impose. Instead, they've created a Canadian government that's more defiant, more unified, and more determined to diversify away from American dependence than ever before. What's particularly interesting is how this new dynamic plays out behind closed doors. Despite the public tensions, Carney and Trump have developed an unexpected communication channel. They exchange text messages all the time about these matters.
Blanchette was trying to say, well, you said you'd negotiate a deal with them and you didn't. And when was the last time you were in Washington? And when are you going to see him next? And Carney said, well, I don't need to go to Washington. The president of the United States is a modern man. And we exchange text messages all the time. And he also said that we've got the best deal with the United States. Remember back to the election campaign? He said, Donald Trump wants to break us so that America can own us. We got the same tariffs that Trump was talking about back then. And now it's the best deal in the world. The elbows are definitely down. What a difference.
With Carney recently revealing he doesn't need to visit Washington because the president is what he calls a modern man who prefers digital communication. Annan's UN speech laid out Canada's three-pillar foreign policy response to Trump's aggression. First, strengthening defense through NORAD and NATO, essentially telling Trump that Canada won't be intimidated militarily. Second, economic resilience through diversified trade partnerships, a direct challenge to America's economic leverage. And third, promoting core values like democracy and multilateralism, everything Trump's America First agenda opposes. The timing of this speech is crucial. Canada recently dropped many of its retaliatory tariffs to match U.S. exemptions under the United States-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, appearing to make concessions. But Annan's UN address reveals the real strategy. Canada is playing the long game, building alternative partnerships while publicly defending the international order that Trump is trying to tear down. In recent months, Canada has signed a strategic defense partnership with the European Union, a new trade deal with Indonesia, and expanded collaboration with Mexico. These aren't just economic moves, they're strategic repositioning to reduce dependence on an increasingly unreliable American partner. Carney himself has been working overtime on the international stage, meeting with world leaders to ensure work is being done and progress is being tracked.
Under fire from the Conservatives for spending too much time abroad, Mark Carney defended his recent trips to both the UN in New York and here to London.
You actually have to do the work. You have to meet with the leaders to make sure the work's being done. You have to mark progress as it's being done, which is what we're doing with the various European leaders.
Carney met with the Prime Minister of the UK, Iceland, Spain, and Australia while he's here in London, but he didn't sign any new trade agreements, including the law-negotiated Canada-UK free trade deal. That led Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to...
His recent trips to London, meetings with the Prime Ministers of the UK, Iceland, Spain, and Australia, all serve to strengthen Canada's position, beyond North America. Daniel Bailon, a political science professor at McGill University, captured the significance perfectly. The emphasis on both resilience and multilateralism can be understood as a response to the Trump White House's current trade and foreign policies. The growing level of uncertainty on the global stage is triggering a rethinking of the country's global role in the era of Trump 2.0. But Trump's biggest miscalculation may be underestimating how his rhetoric has transformed Canadian politics. His annexation threats weren't seen as jokes in Canada. They were viewed as genuine threats to sovereignty that demanded a serious response. When Trump posted on social media during Canada's election day that Canadians should elect someone with the strength and wisdom to make Canada the cherished 51st state of the United States of America, it wasn't campaign help. It was electoral poison that helped seal Carney's victory. Meanwhile, Trump's domestic actions are raising alarm bells internationally. His recent threats to deploy military forces to Portland to handle what he calls domestic terrorists in American cities shows an increasingly authoritarian approach that makes allies nervous about America's democratic stability.
Portland has been the scene of a number of protest demonstrations, particularly at ICE facilities. And after the recent shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas, Texas, we're seeing now that this recommendation coming from the Director of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, and now the president doubling down on that, saying that they wants to ensure the protection of ICE officers in Portland. Now, of course, we know not only have there been demonstrations and protests, but there have also been injuries where there have been confrontations between the protesters and demonstrators and law enforcement there. And so what we're seeing now is the president is now focusing on Portland, Oregon, as well as other places such as Memphis, Tennessee. And we know the president most recently backed off of sending National Guard troops into Chicago.
The irony is palpable. Trump, who prides himself on being a master negotiator, has managed to create the exact opposite of what he wanted. Instead of a compliant neighbor, he's facing a more assertive Canada. Instead of economic submission, he's triggered diversification efforts. Instead of weakening multilateralism, he's given countries like Canada powerful reasons to strengthen international institutions. Annan's careful diplomatic language at the UN masked a fundamental shift in Canadian strategy. When she said Canada will not turn inward and promise to work toward a world where prosperity is shared, security is collective, and peace is lasting, she was articulating a vision that directly contradicts Trump's zero-sum worldview. This isn't just about Canada and the United States, it's about the future of international relations. Trump's aggressive unilateralism was supposed to demonstrate American strength and force other countries to accept American terms. Instead, it's showing the world that America under Trump is an unreliable partner that can't be trusted to honor agreements or respect sovereignty. Other allies are watching how Canada handles Trump's pressure, and Annan's UN speech sends a clear message. It's possible to resist American bullying while maintaining important relationships. Her approach, firm in principle, diplomatic in tone, provides a template for other middle powers dealing with Trump's transactional approach to international relations. The next phase of this relationship will be crucial. Canada faces a review of the free trade deal next year, and Trump will likely use that as leverage to extract concessions. But Carney's government, strengthened by its electoral mandate to resist American pressure, is in a much stronger position than Trump anticipated. Moreover, Canada's strategy of diversifying trade relationships while strengthening multilateral institutions creates alternatives that didn't exist before. If Trump pushes too hard, Canada now has options, something that wasn't true when NAFTA was originally negotiated. Trump's fundamental misunderstanding of soft power is becoming increasingly apparent. He believes that economic and military strength automatically translate into political influence. But his heavy-handed approach has actually reduced American influence by making other countries less willing to cooperate. Annan's UN speech represents more than Canadian foreign policy. It's a case study in how middle powers can maintain independence in an era of great power competition. By appealing to international law, multilateral institutions, and shared values, Canada is building coalitions that constrain American unilateralism. The broader implications extend far beyond North America. If Trump's intimidation tactics fail against Canada, America's closest ally and most integrated economic partner, what does that say about their effectiveness elsewhere? European allies, Asian partners, and other countries facing American pressure are taking notes on Canada's approach. Perhaps most importantly, Annan's speech demonstrates that Trump's America First agenda has created its own opposition. Every time Trump threatens sovereignty, imposes tariffs, or undermines international institutions, he provides other countries with powerful reasons to work together without America. The United Nations General Assembly was supposed to be Trump's stage to project American dominance. Instead, it became a platform for allies like Canada to articulate alternative visions of international cooperation. Annan's diplomatic pushback, delivered in both English and French to emphasize Canada's distinct identity, showed the world that Trump's intimidation tactics have limits. As this relationship continues to evolve, one thing is clear. Trump's strategy of maximum pressure has created maximum resistance. Canada's response, defiant but diplomatic, principled but pragmatic, may well become the model for how other countries navigate the challenges of dealing with an increasingly aggressive America. The question now isn't whether Canada will submit to American pressure, but whether Trump will recognize that his approach has fundamentally backfired. Annan's UN speech suggests that Canada is prepared for a long-term strategy of resistance, one that strengthens international institutions while reducing dependence on an unreliable neighbor. In trying to make America great again, Trump may have inadvertently made the rest of the world more unified in opposition to American hegemony. That's not the legacy any American president would want, but it may be exactly what Trump has earned through his diplomatic failures and strategic miscalculations. Canada's foreign minister just showed the world how to stand up to a bully while maintaining dignity and principle. The real question is whether Trump is smart enough to learn from this lesson, or whether he'll double down on tactics that have already proven counterproductive.